Ashley. Thank you for coming into our Let's Talk Mom conversations. These are conversations that we have been having over the last 4 weeks, and today is the bonus session that will be all about grief and how do you navigate holiday grief. I am super excited about today. Look, our people are coming on. I love it. I love it. So let me go ahead and invite both of you guys. So when you see the invitation pop up, come on and join us. Yes. Cindy, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Hi. How are you guys?
Good.
We are here on Thursday to talk all about grief. I see people are joining in. Thank you so much for coming in tonight. I was just kind of talking about the fact that we've had some really amazing conversations this month, and I am so excited. I have extended this until December because people are like, we cannot stop having these conversations. And so we'll talk about what's coming up in December in a little bit. But as tradition dictates, I'm drinking on something. I'm drinking on water tonight. You guys have anything that you're drinking on tonight?
I've got my decaf tea because it's freezing cold up here in Connecticut today.
Oh, wow.
I meant to grab my coffee, but it's okay.
It's okay. It's okay. So thank you guys so much for accepting this invitation to come and talk tonight, have this conversation. It is so needed. Suicide is one of the major things that people battle with around the holidays because of grief. And so I'm really excited that you guys accepted this invitation so we can kind of break down what it means and how do you navigate it. So I want you guys to just introduce yourself for our viewers. Hi, James. How are you? Hope you're doing well. Today as well. We're all doing good. And you guys can tell Mr. James how you're doing as well. Okay. So, Monet, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. So my name is Monet Itana. And of course, I am a mother first. I'm a mother of a 26-year-old Navy sailor and a 22-year-old daughter who is in grad school. I am in the financial industry. I am a blogger for lupus. And I also own the Griefpath. I'm a grief specialist. I can help anybody online in the world. So you have the comfort of the one-on-one and the comfort of your home. And I'm a new author as well.
Congratulations. Tell us about the name of your book.
My book is called No Longer Bound. And it is my autobiography. It is a story of how I overcame abuse, abandonment, sexual assault, and it was written to empower women, but it can help anybody overcome the chains that they're bound in. So hopefully, thank you, James. Hopefully it's helping a lot of people.
So good. Love that. And tell us about how you became a mommy. Like, what's your mommyhood journey been? We kind of are dishing about mommyhood tonight too. So what's your mommyhood journey been like?
Well, I've been a single mom for the most part. I had my son first when I was in college, met his dad in college. And, I had him in 95. And then it was tough. I really didn't have a lot of support from his father. So it was just he and I for a while till he was 4 years old. And my daughter came along, and her dad has been phenomenal. He's what the ideal dad should be. She's a spoiled daughter.
A princess, a daddy's princess.
So, yeah. So our co-parenting is great. I mean, obviously she's grown now, but it definitely was not easy by any means. Mm-hmm. So to see where they are today makes me really proud.
That's so awesome. That's a testament to you and to Dad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, Miss Lucinda, can you introduce yourself to our viewers today? Thank you guys for joining us tonight, by the way.
Happy to. So my name is Lucinda Testo, and I am a psychotherapist for more than 17 years.
Wow.
And I am also a certified life coach, and I work primarily with divorced and divorcing women and moms. So that's a little bit about what I do. As far as my mommy story, I have two kids, currently 14 and 10 years old. I got married when I was around 26, 27 years old, and probably pretty quickly knew that I had married probably the wrong guy. But I wanted it to work so bad. And so I had my son first, and then I had my daughter. And shortly after my daughter was born, I decided that I couldn't continue with the marriage. So my son had just turned 4 and my daughter was 8 months old when I had my now ex-husband move out. And actually this weekend, the weekend after Thanksgiving, marks the 10-year mark from when I had him move out. So I went through my first holiday season alone as a single mom, and it was brutal. It was pretty brutal. And I was a single mom for about 4 years, worked 2 jobs. I had my kids all but every other weekend. And about 4 years after I divorced is when I met my now current husband.
Yeah.
And now we have a blended family.
Yeah, I kind of was snooping on your page the other day, and I saw you make a post about that, about just the testimony that a single mom can go from, that divorce to finding love. And so we'll get into some of that, I'm sure, later on. But tell me, guys, and I know that both of you kind of specialize in grief, but grief in different areas. Tell us what you define as what is grief? What is grief? And is grief different from mourning? So what is grief, and is grief different from mourning?
Okay, so I'll answer. So grief is any normal and natural response to loss of any kind. And so, obviously the most common when we think of grief, you think of death, right? But that's not the only thing that we can grieve. We can grieve the loss of a relationship, the loss of our employment status. You can go from being a working person to a retirement. You can grieve the loss of a marriage. You can grieve the loss of what you thought that your life was supposed to be like, those unmet expectations. And when it comes to grief is what we actually feel on the inside of us. It's all of the emotions. It's the loneliness, the hopelessness, the uncertainty that we might feel. It can also be anger. And mourning, on the other hand, is how we handle it, how we process that. Whether we pray, we journal, we go and talk to someone about it, or we cry. So that's the difference between the two.
Yeah. So something, and I'm going to come to you as well, Lucinda, but something that you said, I wanted to kind of dig in a little bit more of, but you talked about the different things that you might grieve. And one of the things that you shared is that sometimes you can grieve from unmet expectations. Tell us more about that, because I'm gonna preface this. So everybody knows that when I do these conversations, I am just mama. I am just Taisha. I am not a therapist. I am not whatever. I am just Taisha. So something that I realized over the last maybe year to 2 years is that I was grieving. I was grieving a loss of an unmet expectation. So talk about that. What does that look like? And how does someone recognize if they are grieving from an unmet expectation? Because I don't think that I had the terminology, and I don't think that I actually identified that I was actually grieving and what that meant for me. So talk to people, like, how do they recognize if they're grieving?
I mean, I think that's perfectly put. For me, it was less about the grief of losing the actual husband, because I was ready to let go of
You're like, kick rocks, okay? Like, please kick rocks.
Yes. For me, it was more around the unmet expectation of, this is not what I signed up for. This is not how my life was supposed to turn out. I'm supposed to have the house and the white picket fence and the 2 kids and the dog and all that other stuff. And because I grew up in an intact household and my parents had been married for more than 50 years, it was really hard for me to let go of, this can't be happening to me. And so it was the expectation of what I had in my mind as to how my marriage was supposed to turn out versus how it was turning out. And that was a big grief for me.
Yeah. It's a big
Really
loss.
big.
Yeah, it's a huge loss. I work with the people that I work with are people that have experienced some type of dysfunctional upbringing. So they have dysfunctional relationships with their parents, and just life didn't pan out the way that we see in movies. Like sometimes we grow up watching the Cosby shows. Raise your hand if you grew up watching the Cosbys and you said, this is the lifestyle that I want, right? But for a lot of my clients, they didn't grow up with that lifestyle. And so as full-grown adults, they're now still grieving that loss. That loss that they had because maybe the relationship they had with their parent, their mom or their father, wasn't what we saw in the Cosby Show.
Yep. And it's
so
a lot of it's not fair.
It's not fair.
It's not fair.
Yeah, it's not fair. So talk to those people that may be grieving from their childhoods even.
Well,
and
that
would be me.
Yeah, go for it.
Part of the abandonment that I talk about in my book is not just abandonment in relationships, but abandonment of a parent, because my mother committed suicide at 3 years old.
Wow.
So as a young girl growing up, although I had supportive grandparents and, my dad, doing his thing until he got remarried, and I had a stepmom. But all of those feelings of abandonment manifested later in life in relationships. I had issues with not only abandonment, but rejection. I was clingy. I thought that, if I didn't behave a certain way, that these people would leave me too, just like my mother did, So it can manifest later on. You may not realize it initially until you reach a certain milestone in your life. And so, you just have to realize that you are not the cause of that. It was a journey.
How did you recognize that you were grieving? Like, I didn't recognize that I was grieving until I started getting around other moms and recognizing the kind of some signs. So were there I know that you said, how did you connect that it was grief? How did you know that it wasn't just abandonment, or it wasn't like just a relationship issue? How did you recognize that this is actually grief?
So I held on to unforgiveness for a while. You get to those points where you have, I have my kids. You think about all the things that your mom is supposed to be there for, their birth and their graduation. And when you want to cook together for the holidays. And so once I forgave her, I said, okay, I'm good. But it wasn't until I became certified in grief. I did that to want to help others. But going through that process, I realized that I was still holding on to something. Yeah. And you know what that was? Anger.
Yeah.
Anger. And I realized that I was still grieving her. Because even though my life had been good, I had, the support of, like I said, the grandparents, I still had a part of me that was still angry with her.
Yeah.
For not saying, let me put my babies first. Yeah.
That's huge. What about for you, Lucinda? How did you recognize that it was actually grief? How did you connect those dots for yourself?
For me, my grief was just like an overwhelming sadness. And again, going back to my life is not turning out the way it was supposed to turn out, and the it's not fair piece. I was stuck in the it's not fair piece for a really long time.
Yeah, that's so good. And so with anything, there are stages to grieving, right? There are stages to it. Can you kind of talk to us about the different stages that someone may experience as they're grieving?
So it's funny that you say that. So I used to believe that there were stages for grief, but newsflash, there aren't.
Come on now.
There are no stages. A woman by the name of Dr. Ross talked about stages, and she was referencing terminal illness. So you get diagnosed with a terminal illness, you may have denial first. I don't believe that. Why is this happening to me? However, when you think about grief, I've never met anyone who came to me and said, my relative or whatever is still alive. They know that that person has passed away. Mm-hmm. So saying that everybody who experiences grief is going to be the same across the board, that negates the unique and individual relationship that we all have with another person. As we know, that's not going to be the same.
Yeah.
So the things that grievers may have in common, they may have a feeling of numbness, they may lose sleep, they may, not eat well, their concentration may be off, but there's no absolutes in grief. So to say that there are, she's in this stage, this is not correct.
Yeah, that's so good. Would you add anything differently, Lucinda?
I would say that grief is definitely not linear, right? So it's not like every day it just keeps getting better and better and better and better. That'd be great. But unfortunately, grief, you kind of move back and forth and you hit the different emotions at different times. And I mean, it could be 10 years and I can, think of a grandparent and it could still bring me to tears. So it doesn't necessarily go away. It maybe lessens or it changes, but it's definitely not like first you hit this step and then this step and then this step. You're constantly like moving back and forth.
Yeah, that's so good. Something that I noticed on my own journey is that there are different parts to what I grieve, meaning that today I might grieve one aspect of the loss, and then I get through that part of it and I come to a sense of acceptance, let's say. And then I start grieving another aspect of the loss. And I thought that I was over it, right? But I'm grieving different parts of it. For example, someone that I may have lost, someone that transitioned, maybe they were the person I will always call in the middle of the night. And so when I go to pick up the phone and they're not there, I can't talk to that person. That's a loss. But then when I get married and that person is no longer there to walk me down the aisle, that's another loss that's another aspect of the loss. And so I feel like I start the grieving process all over again, but it's still, would you say it's a different part of it? Would you say it's the same process? How do you make sense of it?
I would say it's just different stimuli.
Yeah.
That we encounter, it's like all the things that you mentioned. Also, it can be a song that you hear or a certain smell. Somebody used to cook a certain thing or their house used to smell a certain way when you walked in. And so all of those different stimuli can take you back and make you feel sad. And you're still grieving that person. So like she was saying, you just, it's not linear. It comes and goes. You have good days and you have bad days. So some days are just a little easier than others.
Yeah. So to that respect, as you said, it is very complex. Is there ever an end? You said that it's linear. So with that saying, you're saying that it never ends. There's always different parts of it, or do you ever get to this point where you're okay?
I think you do get to a point where you're okay. Mm-hmm. I don't know if grief necessarily ends. I don't envision it as having like an end point, but I think it changes. I think it changes. I think, life goes on. You kind of accept what is. And depending on the loss, whether it's a death, whether it's a divorce, whether it's abandonment, I think you come to accept what is and you keep on going. But like I said, that doesn't mean that, right, your wedding day comes up and you don't choke up or well up because your dad's not there to walk you down the aisle, right? So if grief ended, then that wouldn't happen. You'd be like, oh, yeah, okay, that ended that happened 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. So is there...
What do you think, Monet? Do you think, would you agree?
Well, so the method that my company uses is based on grief recovery. So I'm certified by the Grief Recovery Institute. And so what grief recovery focuses on is completing the grief, because most times when people are hurting, they are in that moment of unexpected, unmet expectations, things they didn't get to say, things they didn't get to do, if only this, if only that. And so they are hurting because they feel, or they have an emotional something that's not finished. And so unlike when you go to a grief support place and everybody just, sits around and they share how they're feeling in that moment, and then you go home, guess what? After a week or two, you need to talk again. Why? Because you didn't get any completion of your grief.
Yes, so
Whereas with grief recovery, we are working together to heal your heart, to complete whatever that was incomplete with that particular relationship and that person. So it doesn't mean that when you heal your heart that you forget about them. They're still there. You still have all the beautiful memories, all the things that you shared, but you're just no longer allowing the pain to run your life.
That's really good. So what does when you say recovery from grief and completing the process, what does that look like? And is there a healthy way versus an unhealthy way to complete that process?
Yes. So when you do a one-on-one with me, it's a 7-week one-on-one, 1 to 2 hours, 1 hour and a half a week that we meet. You have heart work, which is homework assignments. You learn about all the myths. You learn about short-term energy relieving behaviors, or STIRBs, which are what we use to bypass the time, whether that's we indulge ourselves in alcohol or eating or working out or whatever to pass the time. And so unhealthy, of course, is going to be anything that's adding to your emotional pain, or it doesn't help you. You're overeating. Like I was an emotional eater for years. You're doing that to mask something. You are in addictive behaviors or just different things to keep you going, nothing to help you. Whereas with grief recovery, that's going to be healthy because you are working actively. You are putting in the work to, work towards healing yourself. And knowing that once you're healed, okay, it's not that it's all good, because you're going to have those different stimuli that come up, but you will also be equipped to now have these tools that you've been educated to use to say, okay, this is what I'm going through. Let me go back and apply this to what I'm going through right now.
So would it be something like, okay, I had a loved one that passed on. I never got to say something that I really wanted to say to them. Would that recovery process would be you actually being able to say that, and you as the worker would be holding that space with that person so they can get to say that, so it completes what their heart needs.
Exactly. That is one of the last things.
Yes. I love that. I love that, because in my practice, I talk a lot about honoring yourself, and trauma happens when you were not able to, quote unquote, rescue yourself. And so what I hear you saying is that you walk them through a process of being able to rescue themselves, honor themselves, so they can feel complete and heard and validated and seen, because that's what we all really want, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, yes, that's what we really want. I love that. So what about the people that really struggle with letting it go? For whatever reason, like there are some people that I work with, even women that have had, that have ended their pregnancies themselves. Sometimes they struggle with the grief of that loss, and they have a really difficult time letting it go. Talk to people that struggle with letting that go, letting the grief go, letting the loss go, making peace with it, or just releasing it.
So oftentimes, when someone comes and says, okay, I want to, get help with, just like you said, a baby that I didn't have or what have you, there is a process during the course of our sessions where we basically do a timeline of all of our losses in our life. And oftentimes, if you think about that particular situation, there were other people, other factors that played into that particular situation. So that may not really be the real issue.
Yes. Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes what I found is that underneath grief is a lot of judgments that we might hold about ourselves and about other people. So I think that you're so on point with that. Would you add anything to that, Lucinda?
Yeah, and also what society thinks too, I think sometimes plays a big part, right?
Especially
Worrying
with
about
single
judgments from
moms.
others.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. So during the holidays, we talked about this earlier. Talk to like us in the holiday season, because that's usually a big trigger for people that experience grief or that have had major losses. The holidays are huge because you see people with their family, and talk about what's expected in society. Talk to those people that may be struggling right now in the holiday season.
So, I mean, coming from the perspective of like being the single mom in the holiday season, right? What are you bombarded with? There's commercials of families. There's the families in the matching Christmas PJs. There's stuff all over the internet. And, you know, having to accept that that's not your reality anymore is really difficult. And so I always, you know, now that I'm 10 years out from my situation, I really encourage people to like have a plan in place for the holidays. Like know what your parenting plan is, have a plan in place, ask for help, create new traditions is a big one. I don't know. Make the holidays what you want them to be. They don't have to be bad just because they're different.
Yeah.
And I think that's the message.
Yeah, I think that word different is very important, because sometimes we get really stuck on what it was. And the whole key is finding your new and what the difference can be, and knowing that different can be equally as satisfying. And so what I also find is that sometimes people may have loyalty to the person or the situation that they lost. They may feel a sense of loyalty to it. And so what do you guys think about that in regards to sometimes I don't want to move past it because I was loyal to it. I was loyal to my mom or my dad that transition. And so I can't enjoy this holiday because in some way that means that I'm turning my back on them.
I would say that the person would, my advice would be to think about your loved one and what would they think about you feeling that way? Would they want you to not enjoy yourself during the holidays, or would they want you to, you know, have memories and create new memories and just continue to live? Because, you know, as long as you stay in that place, you can't continue to grow and bloom. And like she was saying, creating new experiences. You know, different doesn't mean bad. It doesn't have to be traditional. You know, you can travel 1 year and go somewhere else, or, you know, maybe you don't want to do the traditional Christmas dinner. You can go out to eat somewhere. You know, just continuing to live, because you have other people and you have yourself that you have to continue going for.
And sometimes you have to find out, well, what do I need in this moment? And so that sometimes requires us to kind of really get really mindful and really still about identifying what do I feel like would honor me in this moment, right? Honor these feelings, honor my past, and move me forward in a healthy way. So I love that. So kind of going back to you, Lucinda, you mentioned something about your past as the single mom. I've, been dealing with a lot of parents that struggle with shame around their loss. And because of that shame, that keeps them stuck in grief. Can you talk to that part of it?
Oh, yeah. I had a ton of shame, so much shame that because I got separated around the holidays, I was like, I can't send out Christmas cards this year, because if I send out Christmas cards, there's just going to be 3 names instead of 4 names. I mean, that's how like trivial it got. That's the kind of stuff that I worried about, is judgment from other people. And then it was, should I have really done this like before the holidays? Should I have just waited till January? And that certainly, I think, just exasperated my grief instead of mitigated it, for sure.
Yeah. And I also have seen moms that really just blame themselves for whatever the situation may be currently. And I think that sometimes it's really helpful to give ourselves grace, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really understand why we made the decisions that we made and being okay with that and making peace with that. I see you shaking your head, Manya. What do you have to say about that part? Giving yourself grace.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm guilty of beating myself up the most, about anything, second guessing, oh, if I would have, maybe made this decision at that time, maybe things would have been this way. But I made whatever decision I made because I needed to make that in that moment, because, single motherhood is not easy and it has its own challenges. And so when we place the G word, as I like to say, for guilt, because guilt is something that infers that we, in reference to someone that may no longer be here, some people blame themselves or, like you were saying, shame. Those things don't belong to us, because guilt means that you intentionally did something to that person. You wanted to hurt that person. And so we know that that's probably not the case. And so we have to remind ourselves that guilt doesn't belong with grief. It doesn't belong at all. And so we should be able to feel what we feel and embrace it, because a lot of people will talk about how they feel without really showing the emotion part. They'll do the fact talking, for example, I lost my mom when I was 3. That's just a statement, versus I lost my mom when I was 3 and it hurt me. That's the emotion behind it. And so if we can just change the, dynamic of applying guilt.
Mm-hmm. I also think there's some guilt that's just inherent in motherhood in general, but especially when you're choosing, right? Mom guilt all over the place
all the time, right?
And so especially when it comes to something like ending a marriage, it's like, what am I doing to my kids? Now my kids, their life is going to change. And so there's a lot of guilt that bubbles up around, the impact on kids too when you're a mom.
Yeah. And some of that is really internalized, it's my fault. This is my fault. I made this choice, so it is my fault, and I should feel this guilt and I should feel this shame. And I think that's where that's where the grace comes in. And you know what else I also think? Sometimes we have to understand that even sometimes we don't make all the right choices, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's okay to not have made the best decision, because you made the best. I love what you just said, because you made the best decision in that moment that you knew to make.
Mm-hmm.
There was a reason that you made. And maybe 10 years from now, you're like, it wasn't a great decision. But you can't now go back and judge your decision then based on the knowledge that you know now, because you didn't have that knowledge back then.
Right.
And I think that's really important to kind of discern for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that you guys think that people really need to know on their grief journey? I'll go to both of you for this.
It doesn't always hurt this bad, is what I would say. So I don't know. I see grief as kind of a journey. And like I said, it kind of ebbs and flows, and life does resume normalcy. You can move on. Life can be good. You can be happy again. That's probably the biggest message.
I love that. That is so hopeful, because sometimes you do, when you're stuck in the middle of grief,
it feels hopeless. For sure.
It's going to always feel like that. But I love that message that it always gets better. Mm-hmm. It will never be the same. It won't always be the same. I love that. Mm-hmm. What about for you, Marnie? What do people really need to know while they're on this journey?
That it is a journey. You don't just wake up and you're never going to hurt again. You're never going to have those triggers. I would say not to compare your grief journey to someone else's, because each relationship is different and unique. So do the work, be ready to heal. You owe yourself that much. You owe it to yourself.
Comparing your journey to other people, that is something that is really serious. How does that even look? How do you know when you're comparing your journey to other people?
Well, a lot of times other people will bring that up. I don't think that they intentionally do it, because people will say, like with some of the myths, just give it a little bit more time, and there is no set time for grief. So when people say that, oh, well, he or she passed away a year ago, you're still grieving, like, you need to see somebody, or you need to do this or need to do that. I don't think that you should still be hurting after all this time, but that's that particular person's experience.
Yeah, I love that. So thinking
grief
what
is very individualized. So everybody experiences it differently. So the comparison game is never going to make you feel good.
Right.
That's so good. That's so good. So tell us again what you guys do in terms of supporting people that are in their grief journey, and how can people find you?
So like I said, I support mostly divorcing and divorced women and moms, and supporting them through I call it like managing the muck, which is like all of that grief, and really helping them to shift their mindset towards the future and what they want to create, taking the lessons, getting to know and love themselves again, and truly believing that a wonderful life is possible on the other side of their grief.
I love that. Hope. Without losing hope. Yeah, I love that. Monier?
So I can be reached at thegriefpath.com. It has my phone number. You can schedule a consultation. We can do consultation to find out, what it is that you are grieving. And we can talk about the action steps that are taken to get you on the path of healing your heart. So it's an opportunity for you and I to just really speak about, what's hurting and what's bothering you, and how we can, get you on that path to completion.
Love that. Any last words for our viewers tonight?
I'd say I like what you said earlier about giving yourself grace through the holidays. Don't compare. It's okay to make new traditions. It's okay to do stuff that's non-traditional. I'm a big one about reaching out for support and asking for help. Lots of times people are apprehensive about reaching out to you. It's okay to reach out to other people. Hey, do you have room for one more at the Thanksgiving table this year? I don't have my kids.
I think that is one of the hardest things for people to do. Sometimes when we are in this process, in any process, we feel like we're a burden to other people, I think. And I love what you just said, recognizing that we're not a burden to people, and people really do want to support you.
Yeah. And but sometimes people don't reach out because they don't want to make you feel uncomfortable.
Yes, exactly. And so, putting yourself out there is one of the bravest things that you could ever do. Because like you said, people don't really know how to support you. And unless you say it, they won't know what to do. I think that is one of the most beautiful gifts that you can give yourself, is to reach out for support. And just 100%. impose on people if you need to. If you feel like you're imposing, impose. Because people want to support.
They do.
I love that. I love that. Monier, any last words?
Yes. So grief is not something that, like she just said, it's not something that people feel comfortable with reaching out. And I know you've heard the term check on your strong friends.
Yes.
Because they're the ones that oftentimes need somebody the most. And so I would just say in this season of, the holidays, have more compassion for people, you know, be willing to listen. Sometimes they don't want your advice. They just want to vent, you know, and just have a heart for them. And just know that these times are only temporary. Your pit is just temporary.
I love that. One of the things that you said, I want to just kind of talk to the person that is trying to support someone experiencing grief. And you just said that, you know, tell us again what you give the person that is supporting the person experiencing grief some support tonight, because that is being a caregiver is hard. It's really hard, especially with grief, because sometimes we struggle with it because we're like, well, I don't really know what to say. And
the biggest thing that grievers want is to be heard.
Yeah.
Period. That's it.
So I was going to say empathy, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's expecting you to solve it for us, solve our grief for us. And even sometimes saying stuff like, oh, you'll feel better soon can feel very invalidating.
Yeah.
So just empathizing with, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I know this is so hard for you. Like, that's what people need. They need to feel, you know, like Monier said, like heard and understood and validated. You don't have to solve anybody's problems.
That's so
Right.
Whether it's grief or anything else, says the therapist.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
Just listen.
Absolutely.
Just listen.
mhm.
Just listening. And then sometimes, you know, listening, but also being there. And, you know, I've heard this one thing, and I think that it's so amazing. Sometimes people don't want to be a burden, so they won't ask you for things. Like they may be hungry and won't ask you to help with dinner, right? And so sometimes you can be there in really practical ways. Like you may say something like, hey, I'm going to go to Target today. Do you need anything from Target? Or what do you need from Target? Or what do you need from whatever store you're going to? Or I'm coming over. Do you mind if I come over today? Like asking, you know, in really practical ways, how you can support that person. What do you guys think about that?
I'd say for the person who's not grieving, who's, you know, the person who's the support person, I wouldn't ask. I would just tell them.
Yeah.
You know what
yeah.
I mean? Because if you ask, it's like, oh, no, I don't
Yeah.
need that.
Yeah.
Or I'm fine. Thank you anyway. It's, hey, you're coming over on Thanksgiving. You know, dinner's at 2. Or, you know, I'm picking your kid up from school today because I know you work till 6 on Tuesdays. It's kind of doing and insisting rather than asking, because when you ask, we as women and moms tend to be like, no, it's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's so good. That's so good. All right. Thank you, ladies, so much for your expertise and your tips for how do you navigate the holidays through grief, with grief. I love that. And so kind of just talking kind of in that same vein, we're going to be I've decided to extend these conversations through December. So we are going to have 5 people joining us in December. The first one is going to be December 2nd, talking about getting out of stuck. This conversation, sometimes we can get stuck in grief, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you've ever been stuck in life, felt stuck, join us on December 2nd with Christina Rizzo. This is part 2 of our conversation that we had earlier this month with Christina, talking about how do you go from where you were to where you want to be, what that process looks like for you. So I invite you guys back to have that conversation with us. And then on December 9th, we're going to talk about dating and mating as a single and co-parenting mom, which is going to be a really exciting conversation with Lakeisha Harris. This is also a part 2. Lakeisha joined us last week, and she has a book called Heal, Date, and Thrive. And so she will be talking to us just about healing and thriving in our dating. And I love going back to you, Lucinda. You talked about how you kind of had some really good victories in this area, right, with dating.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you said that you're remarried now.
Yep.
So we're trying to be like you when we grow up.
Right.
We are trying to be like you when we grow
I'll
up.
give you
So,
all my secrets.
yeah, give us all your secrets. So yeah, Lakeisha will be here on the 9th, giving us her secrets of how she has managed to live a thriving dating life as a single and co-parenting mom. And then on the 16th, for those moms that may want to get married sometime, we're going to talk about how to prepare for marriage with a really, really special guest that, you know, we're still working on that part of it. So on the 16th, we're going to talk about marriage. So we're going to talk about dating and mating, and then we're going to talk about marriage. If you decide that you want to get married one day, how do you prepare for that? And then December 23rd, how do you break a generational curse? A lot of us say that we are curse breakers. My whole motto is rehabilitate your life. How do you do that? How do you go from a dysfunctional family upbringing to thriving and successful and living a successful life? We're going to talk about that with Alicia Jackson. And then December 30th, one of my favorite people is going to come to us and talk about how do you lose weight and keep it off for good? How do you ditch that yo-yo diet mentality and do things that are sustainable? I am so excited about that conversation. If you caught me on Facebook last year with Will Trina Jones, it was a really great conversation. So I'm excited that she will be back this year to join us. So all month long in December, join us for one or all of our conversations right here on Instagram Live. And did you guys tell us where we can find you on social media?
I didn't.
Please tell us where you can find us on social media.
My website is lucindatesto.com, nice and easy. And on Instagram, it's at coach_Lucinda_testo.
There we go. Miss Monet, where can we find you?
So the website again is thegriefpath.com. On Instagram, it is at thegriefpath, all one word, no underscore. There's a couple that are similar. And then also unbreakable_survive her. So it's SURVIVHER.
Excellent. Thank you, ladies, so much. This was a heavy topic, but it's so needed. It's so needed. So if you are navigating grief and you need support, please, please, please reach out to these ladies at their websites and at their social media handles. They are amazing in their own right. So thank you guys for joining us. And I will see you, ladies and guys and gentlemen. Thank you, Ryan. Everybody that's on. You guys have a good happy Thanksgiving. And I will see you next Thursday. Bye-bye.